when you come out and when you leave the room, you'll see that we just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat.
So, good morning, sleeping America, with our officials like Nero mostly fiddling while the country burns. Two major issues on the table today, one being the inadequacy of Judge Bryers' order and the other being Dictator Trump's use of national crises or emergency strategies as pretexts to circumvent both the Constitution and federal statute law.
South America, where tensions are escalating between Venezuela and the United States. Washington has reportedly ordered additional ships to the Southern Caribbean as part of President Donald Trump's efforts to address threats from Latin American drug cartels.
First, let's deal with Judge Bryers' order and opinion and the good news that about the decision and order and opinion of Judge Breyer in the Newsom versus Trump case, that it is, although a victory for democracy, undoubtedly, it must be tempered by its rather counterintuitive logic and allowance for federal troops remaining free to protect federal buildings. Let me explain. Because Judge Bryers' order explicitly states that federal troops can continue to protect federal property, but only in a manner consistent with the Posse Comitatus Act, and not for prohibited law enforcement activities like arrests, searches, crowd control, etc. So while this order prevents troops from directly performing domestic law enforcement duties, as described above, it does not prevent them from guarding federal buildings. So how exactly are they guarding federal property without the resources of typical law enforcement? This idea in itself is preposterous. They are guarding nothing if they have no law enforcement powers. Also, another thing, the so-called protecting or guarding of federal buildings and property does not even exist as a term within the Posse Comitatus Act from which Judge Breyer made his decision. It doesn't exist as a term or as an exception or a special condition. And also, this begs the question of how it is possible to be guarding federal property without having to violate the act if they are prohibited from carrying out any of the law enforcement prohibitions as outlined by Judge Breyer in his order. This is all nonsensical. Moreover, the mere presence of federal troops anywhere for any purpose in the streets of an American city is an existential, explicit, and implicit threat to civilian life, and their presence there can at any future time be converted into a military force used as a tool of a tyrannical president, such as ours, to take over all government and control of the cities of the United States.
Simply put, the only crisis here is Donald Trump, and that's because he wants a crisis. He wants a crisis so he can roll tanks in big cities, make it look normal, and he wants that because he intends to try to carry out a coup.
So, if we're looking at the key details of the ruling and the order, Trump is in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. That's one. Two, federal property can be protected. It's allowed, according to this order. The core of Judge Bryers' ruling affirmed that federal troops can perform their, what he calls, traditional role of protecting federal buildings and property, as long as it aligns with federal law and the Posse Comitatus Act. And I've already shown that this is a contradiction in terms. And also, I object to the term traditional role of protecting federal buildings, because this takes me back to ex parte Milligan during the Civil War. And ex parte Milligan, as far as I'm concerned, is still precedent for the United States Supreme Court. But let us also now go over the Posse Comitatus Act, so you understand all of this. It's 18 U.S. Code, Section 1385, the use of Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Special Force as Posse Comitatus. Excuse me. And it says, I'll read, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress, willfully uses any part of the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, or the Space Force as a Posse Comitatus or otherwise to execute the laws shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both.
This is just a wannabe dictator trying to lay the groundwork so people think it's normal to do stuff that is unconstitutional. D.C. is a place where Trump can get away with more because the law permits it. He cannot get away with this in big cities. It violates the 10th Amendment. It violates a variety of laws. And if those supposed anti-crime forces, which they're not at all, if they show up and they start committing local crimes, they can be prosecuted locally. They should be prosecuted locally. And here's the big part. Donald Trump cannot pardon a National Guards person who unjustifiably kills someone, harms someone, detains someone in violation of state law. He can't do it.
Now, that and that alone expresses the meaning, the intention, and the spirit of the law duly created by the Congress in 1878. Having explained all of this for you, I now want to turn to the real existential questions and threat to our democratic republic and its rule of law. And that is the utilization by this rogue fascist and mad president of false and malicious tactics to contrive and generate absolute fake or created national emergencies or national crises as a means to circumvent the Constitution and the federal laws, such as the one we've been discussing.
There's a crisis in the White House.
What's the crisis?
And the president's top advisors have been called together.
Oh, jeez.
The sexual misconduct occurred inside the Oval Office. With the election only days away, how much will this scandal affect the outcome?
The president spent the weekend pressing the flash. He wasn't campaigning, he was dating, actually.
Now, Washington's top spin doctor
We can distract the press for 11 days till the election. I think we got a chance.
has an idea,
We can't afford a war.
We're gonna have the appearance of a war.
but he can't pull it off without Hollywood's top producer.
Do I know you?
We have some mutual friends in Washington.
Why come to me?
We want you to produce.
You want me to produce your war?
Not a war, it's a pageant. We need a theme, a song, some visuals. We need, it's a pageant.
New Line Cinema presents
How close are you to this?
What do you want the kid to say?
all the spectacle,
I know we're all concerned for the president.
I know.
And this brings me to the Venezuelan question. false flag arguments, policies, and military adventures as part of this regime's strategy to convince the judiciary to accept the president's Article 2 powers as an exception to virtually all of these laws of the United States, given the judicial network's inclination to offer him judicial deference, despite Humphrey's Executive 1935 and common sense. The foremost example of this tactic is the current focus on creating a conflict with Venezuela and Maduro and Tren Aragua. Yes, Venezuela. You all know that there are ships, including a nuclear submarine, rushing into the Caribbean towards Venezuela.
Just last week, the U.S. ordered an amphibious squadron to the southern Caribbean. 3 warships are reportedly already heading towards Venezuela's coast as Washington steps up pressure on President Nicolas Maduro, who is accused of heading a cocaine trafficking cartel. The Venezuelan leader has repeatedly claimed that his country is free of drug trafficking. In fact, he's accusing Washington of attempting to force a regime change and has urged citizens to join the Bolivarian militia, a civilian force connected to Venezuela's armed forces.
The blowing up using a missile of a small boat killing 11 human beings for allegedly carrying drugs from Venezuela without any proofs or probable cause or proper arrest and due process is arguably a war crime under international law. But it serves the evil purpose of the Trump regime as an obvious ploy to falsely claim a national emergency that will absolutely be used in various unlawful orders and directives that inevitably will come before the courts, where I fear judicial deference will raise its ugly head, especially if and when it gets, or they get, to the Supreme Court. Now, once more, I am urging all governors, blue state or even in some of the red states, to assert themselves and seize immediate control over their own national guards and to refuse any federal request of dispersal of other national guards or military forces into their streets and repelling them as invaders if necessary. As we approach the 2026 election, should they even be held, and that is absolutely in doubt if Trump believes this is going against him, this will become an existential threat to civilian civil liberties, voting rights, and democracy itself. So thank you for watching and listening. Please subscribe. God bless.